The Velcrin delegation stood in tight formation at the edge of the landing platform, their four eyes blinking in nervous succession as the human transport vessel descended through the purple clouds of their homeworld. Ambassador Threx's chest plates rattled slightly, a telltale sign of anxiety among his species. He had read every report, watched every recording, and memorized every protocol about these strange bipedal creatures from a distant blue world. Yet nothing had truly prepared him for this moment. The ship touched down with remarkable grace, its landing struts barely making a sound against the crystalline surface. Steam hissed from cooling vents as the main hatch slowly opened. 3 humans emerged, their forms seeming impossibly fragile without natural armor or protective shells. The lead human, a female with hair the color of Velcrin's sunset, smiled broadly and extended her hand in the traditional Earth greeting. "Ambassador Threx, I presume. I'm Captain Sarah Chen, and these are my colleagues, Dr. James Rodriguez and Chef Antoine Dubois. We're honored to be here on Velcros Prime." Her voice carried through the translation device with surprising warmth. Threx touched his primary manipulator to hers, the human custom of handshaking still feeling foreign after weeks of practice. "Welcome, Captain Chen. We have prepared extensive accommodations for your stay. The Council is most eager to discuss the trade agreements." The humans followed the delegation through the towering structures of the capital city, their heads constantly turning to observe every detail. Dr. Rodriguez kept pulling out a small device to record images, while Chef Dubois seemed particularly interested in the local vegetation they passed. Threx noticed how the other humans walked without fear, despite being surrounded by beings twice their size. It was unsettling in a way he couldn't quite articulate. As they entered the Grand Council chamber, Threx began his rehearsed speech about Velcrin culture and customs. He was midway through explaining their agricultural practices when a deep, resonating howl echoed through the valley beyond the city walls. Every Velcrin in the chamber froze instantly, their chest plates locking in a defensive posture. The humans looked around curiously. "What was that?" Captain Chen asked, her tone more intrigued than alarmed. Threx's voice trembled slightly as he answered, "That is the razor wing, the apex predator of our world. It hunts the canyons beyond our walls." He gestured toward the massive barrier that surrounded the capital, a structure that had taken centuries to build and maintain. "Apex predator?" Dr. Rodriguez's eyes lit up with scientific interest. "What are its characteristics?" The ambassador felt his anxiety increase. How could he explain the terror that had shaped Velcrin civilization for thousands of years? "The razor wing stands 3 times the height of a human. It has 6 legs, each tipped with claws that can slice through our strongest metals. Its hide is armored with overlapping scales harder than diamond. It has 2 sets of jaws filled with teeth designed to crush bone. Its tail ends in a spiked club that can shatter stone. And it is intelligent, terribly intelligent." "Fascinating," the doctor murmured, making notes. Threx continued, his voice dropping to a more somber tone. "We lose dozens of citizens each year to razor-wing attacks, despite all our precautions. They are the reason we built the walls, the reason we developed our aerial defense systems, the reason our children learn combat training from the moment they can walk. Nothing stops them when they decide to hunt." Chef Dubois had been quiet until this moment. Now he spoke up, his accent thick through the translator. "This creature, how does it taste?" The entire chamber fell silent. Every Velcrin turned to stare at the human chef with expressions of utter disbelief. "Taste?" Threx repeated, certain the translation had malfunctioned. "You cannot be serious." "But of course I am serious," Dubois replied, seeming genuinely confused by their reaction. "If it is an animal, it can be eaten, no? I am curious about the flavor profile. The meat from a creature so powerful, it must be interesting." "Eaten?" Threx felt faint. "No one eats razorwing. It is death itself. It is the nightmare that stalks the darkness. It is unstoppable, Unkillable, impossible to... So no one has tried? Captain Chen interrupted, her expression thoughtful. Tried? Why would anyone try? The few corpses we have recovered after our defense systems succeed in killing one are immediately incinerated, following proper safety protocols. The very thought of consuming such a creature is, Threx struggled to find the right word, unthinkable. The three humans exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Dr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. Ambassador, would it be possible to examine one of these razor wings? For scientific purposes, of course. Before Threx could answer, another howl split the air, closer this time. Alarm klaxons began wailing throughout the city. Council members rushed to observation screens showing the outer perimeter. A razor wing had been spotted approaching from the eastern canyon, moving with frightening speed toward the agricultural districts outside the main walls. Everyone to the shelters, one of the counselors commanded. Seal the emergency bulkheads. But the humans didn't move toward the shelters. Instead, Captain Chen stepped closer to the screens, studying the creature's movements with intense focus. The razor wing was massive, its dark scales gleaming in the fading light, moving with a predatory grace that belied its enormous size. Magnificent, Dr. Rodriguez breathed. It moves like a big cat, Chen observed, but with the weight distribution of a Komodo dragon. Those legs suggest it can probably climb. The tail provides counterbalance. The musculature, Dubois added, squinting at the screen. Very lean, not much fat. The meat would be dense, perhaps tough, without proper preparation. But look at those flanks. That is where the best cuts would be, I think. Threx couldn't believe what he was hearing. The humans were analyzing the most dangerous predator on Velcros Prime like it was livestock. You cannot be suggesting what I think you are suggesting. Captain Chen turned to him with that unnerving smile again. Ambassador, I have a proposal. Our people are interested in establishing strong diplomatic relations with yours. What if we could solve your razor wing problem? Or at least demonstrate that it's not as insurmountable as you believe. Impossible. You don't understand. The razor wing is an animal, Chen stated firmly. An impressive one, certainly. But Earth has had its share of apex predators too. Bears, tigers, crocodiles, great white sharks. Our ancestors learned to hunt them all. Some of them are now endangered because we got too good at it. The comment sent a ripple of shock through the Velcrin observers. The idea that humans had not only survived their world's apex predators, but had hunted them to near extinction was almost incomprehensible. Captain Chen, Threx said carefully, trying to keep his voice steady, I appreciate your confidence, but this is not a matter to be taken lightly. The razor wing has killed some of our finest warriors. Our most advanced weapons sometimes fail against its armor. How could three unarmed humans possibly... Who said anything about being unarmed? Chen's smile widened. Dr. Rodriguez here is also our xenobiologist and tactical specialist. Chef Dubois was a master hunter before he became a master chef. And I've had my share of dangerous encounters. We came prepared for a variety of scenarios. Another alarm sounded. The razor wing had broken through the outer fence line, tearing through the metal barrier like it was paper. Farmers were fleeing in their vehicles, racing toward the city gates. How long until your defense systems engage? Chen asked. 3 minutes, a counselor replied, his voice shaking. But it will be at the agricultural buildings by then. The harvest workers... There's not enough time to evacuate everyone, Dr. Rodriguez noted, studying the tactical display. Chef Dubois was already moving toward the exit. Then we go now, yes? Before the bureaucracy decides our fate. Captain Chen nodded and turned to Threx. Ambassador, I need your authorization to access our ship's equipment bay. We're going to need our gear. Threx found himself torn between diplomatic protocol and the absolute insanity of what was being proposed. But as he watched another feed showing panicked Velcrin farmers trapped in a storage facility with the razor wing approaching, He made his decision. Security, grant them access, and may the ancestors forgive me for allowing this madness. The humans moved with startling efficiency. Within minutes, they had returned wearing what appeared to be lightweight armor and carrying an array of human weapons that Threx didn't recognize. Captain Chen had a large, rifle-like device slung across her back. Dr. Rodriguez carried what looked like a medical kit, along with several cylindrical objects attached to his belt. Chef Dubois, impossibly, was carrying not only weapons, but also a large pack that Threx suspected contained cooking equipment. "We'll need a vehicle," Chen stated. A young Velcrin officer, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination, volunteered immediately. "I will take you. My skimmer is the fastest in the motor pool." As they rushed toward the vehicle bay, Threx found himself following, unable to look away from this unfolding disaster. The council members argued frantically behind him, debating whether to stop the humans or let them proceed. But there was no time for debate. The Razor Wing would reach the trapped farmers in less than 2 minutes. The skimmer shot out of the city gates, its anti-gravity drives pushing it to maximum speed across the purple grasslands. Threx gripped his safety harness as they bounced over the terrain, the Razor Wing now visible in the distance. It was even more massive than the screens had suggested, its movements a terrible dance of predatory grace and devastating power. It had cornered a group of farmers against a storage building, its forked tongue tasting the air as it prepared to strike. Captain Chen loaded her rifle with practiced ease as they approached. "Rodriguez, analysis." The doctor's scanner was already working. "Scales are approximately 12 centimeters thick on the dorsal side, thinner at the joints and underbelly. Internal temperature is elevated. Heat signature shows major blood vessels along the neck and inner legs. Brain cavity is substantial. Recommended targeting: joints first to limit mobility, then go for vital organs." "Dubois?" The chef was studying the creature through specialized optical equipment. "The shoulder. It is where the most meat is, but we must be careful not to damage it too much. The hindquarters also look promising. For killing, I suggest we target the throat after compromising its movement. The blood loss will be significant, but will also help in the draining process." "Draining process?" Threx whispered in horror. "You're actually planning to eat it?" "But of course," Dubois replied cheerfully. "It would be wasteful not to, and I do not waste good ingredients." The skimmer came to a halt about 50 meters from the Razor Wing. The creature's massive head swung toward them, its 4 eyes focusing on these new arrivals. It abandoned its terrified prey and began moving toward the vehicle, clearly recognizing a challenge to its dominance. The ground shook with each step. The 3 humans exited the skimmer calmly. They spread out in a formation that suggested long practice, their movements coordinated without verbal communication. The Razor Wing roared, a sound that made the very air vibrate. It charged. What happened next would be discussed in Velcrin history texts for generations to come. Captain Chen's rifle cracked once, twice, 3 times. Each shot found its mark at the creature's knee joints with impossible precision. The Razor Wing stumbled but didn't fall, its incredible strength keeping it upright. Dr. Rodriguez threw 2 of his cylindrical devices. They attached to the creature's flanks and released some kind of electrical discharge that made the massive predator shriek in pain and rage. But the Razor Wing was adaptive. It changed tactics, sweeping its spiked tail in a wide arc that would have crushed all 3 humans. They dove in different directions, rolling to their feet with fluid grace. Chef Dubois, impossibly calm, fired some kind of net launcher that spread a metallic mesh across the creature's face, tangling its jaws. The creature thrashed wildly, tearing at the net with its claws, but those precious seconds gave Captain Chen the opening she needed. Her next shot wasn't from the rifle, but from a smaller weapon at her hip. A dart flew through the air and embedded itself in the soft tissue of the Razor Wing's throat. The creature's movements began to slow almost immediately. "Heavy tranquilizer," Dr. Rodriguez called out, circling around to get a better angle. It'll take about 90 seconds to fully take effect on something that size. Keep your distance. The razor wing fought the drug with impressive determination, but biology was inevitable. Its movements became sluggish, then uncoordinated. Finally, with a last defiant howl that echoed across the plains, it collapsed onto its side, its massive chest still rising and falling, but its eyes glazed and unfocused. The humans approached the fallen predator cautiously, weapons still ready. Only when Dr. Rodriguez confirmed it was fully sedated did they relax. "Excellent shot, Captain," Rodriguez said, running his scanner over the creature's vital signs. "Heart rate is stable, respiration steady. It'll be out for several hours." Chef Dubois was already walking around the razor wing, examining it with the critical eye of a craftsman evaluating his materials. This will do nicely. The shoulders are even better than I thought. And look at these flanks. Magnifique!" Threx stumbled out of the skimmer, his legs barely supporting him. The young officer who had driven them was making a high-pitched keening sound, the Velcrin equivalent of hysteria. Around them, the farmers who had been moments away from death emerged slowly from their shelter, staring in absolute disbelief at the scene before them. You killed it?" one of them whispered. No, Dubois corrected. "We have only tranquilized it. The killing, that comes later, when we are ready to prepare it properly. You cannot let the meat spoil by leaving the blood in too long." Captain Chen was already on her communication device. "Chen to ship. We need the heavy lift transport and the full field kitchen. Yes, you heard me correctly. We're bringing back dinner. Also, send down some preservation equipment. This is going to be a feast." Threx felt his world tilting. In less than 5 minutes, these 3 humans had accomplished what the entire Velcrin military infrastructure struggled with. They had taken down a razor wing with what appeared to be casual efficiency, treating the nightmare of his people like it was just another day's work. "Ambassador," Captain Chen said, turning to him with that smile that was beginning to look less friendly and more terrifying. "I hope you and your people are hungry. We're going to show you that the greatest threat to your civilization makes for an excellent meal when properly prepared." As the sun set over Velcros Prime, painting the purple sky in shades of orange and red, Threx realized that humanity's addition to the galactic community was going to change everything his people thought they knew about survival, fear, and the food chain. The human transport returned with equipment that looked simultaneously primitive and sophisticated. Large thermal containers, processing tables, various cutting implements that made Threx's eyes water just looking at them, and what Dubois referred to with reverence as his field kitchen. The chef had changed into different clothing, a white coat that he explained was traditional for his profession, though it seemed impractical for the blood work ahead. "First," Dubois announced to the gathering crowd of Velcrin, who had emerged from the city to witness this impossibility, "we must properly field dress the creature. This means removing the internal organs and draining the blood. This is not just for preservation, but also for flavor. Old blood in the meat makes it bitter and tough." Dr. Rodriguez had set up a medical station where he was taking samples of the razor wing's tissue, blood, and scales. "Fascinating biochemistry," he muttered, studying his readouts. "High protein content, complex amino acid chains. The muscle tissue is incredibly dense, which confirms Chef's initial assessment about potential toughness. But look at these omega fatty acids. This creature's meat is probably incredibly nutritious." "Nutritious?" a Velcrin farmer asked weakly. "It is death incarnate." "It's an animal," Rodriguez replied simply, not looking up from his samples. "A very impressive animal, but still bound by the same biological rules as everything else. It eats, it breathes, it bleeds, which means it can die. And if it can die, humans have probably figured out how to eat it." Captain Chen had established a perimeter and was coordinating with Velcrin security forces. More of them had arrived, though they kept their distance from the sedated razor wing as if it might wake up and attack at any moment. Chen seemed amused by their caution. "Ambassador Threx," she called out, "would you like to know how we learned to hunt creatures like this on Earth?" Threx approached hesitantly. "I confess I am both horrified and fascinated," Chen chuckled. "Thousands of years ago, my ancestors on Earth were not the apex predators. We were prey. We had bigger teeth, stronger claws, or tougher skin than most of the things that wanted to eat us. But we had three advantages: intelligence, tool use, and the ability to work together. We learned that the biggest, scariest predator could be brought down if you were smart about it. And then we learned that most things taste pretty good if you cook them right." "Your species has a remarkable relationship with food," Threx observed. "I read in the reports that humans will eat nearly anything." "Not nearly," Chen corrected with a grin. "Humans will eat anything at least once. We're curious that way. Some of Earth's most deadly creatures have become delicacies. Pufferfish that can kill you if prepared wrong. Octopuses with venomous bites. Plants that require extensive processing to remove toxins. If it exists, somewhere there's a human who's figured out how to eat it." Chef Dubois had begun his work with the razor wing. He worked with a combination of reverence and efficiency that suggested deep expertise. His cuts were precise, his movements confident. He explained each step to the gathering crowd, turning the butchering process into an educational lecture. "The key is to understand the anatomy," he said, his blade sliding along the creature's massive shoulder joint. "Every creature has the same basic needs: muscles to move, organs to process energy, systems to circulate fluids. Once you understand this, you can find the best cuts. Here, along this section, you see? This is where the muscle fibers are longest and most developed. This meat will be dense, yes, but with proper preparation, it will also be the most flavorful." Several Velcrin scientists had approached, their initial horror giving way to professional curiosity. One of them, an exobiologist named Kress, watched Dubois work with intense concentration. "Your knife technique," Kress said, "it's remarkably similar to our own surgical procedures. You're following the fascial planes, minimizing damage to the muscle fibers themselves." "But of course," Dubois beamed at having a knowledgeable audience member, "the meat, she must be respected. Even in death, we honor what this creature was by not wasting any part of it. Everything will be used. The choice cuts for the feast tonight, the lesser cuts for stews and stocks, the bones for broth, the organs for those who appreciate them. Even the scales will be cleaned and returned to your people. Perhaps they have industrial uses?" "The scales?" Threx's mind was reeling. "They're harder than our best armor materials." "Then they are worth keeping," Dubois replied simply. "Waste is the only true sin in the kitchen." As the butchering continued, Dr. Rodriguez called everyone over to his station. "I've completed the toxicology analysis. Good news. The meat is completely safe for both human and Velcrin consumption. In fact, it's incredibly healthy, high in protein, low in unhealthy fats, rich in minerals that are essential for Velcrin physiology. If you could farm these creatures, they'd be an ideal food source." "Farm them?" A Velcrin counselor who had joined the crowd spoke up. "You cannot be serious. They are too dangerous, too aggressive, too wild?" Captain Chen interrupted. "Earth had wild cattle once, and wild pigs, and wild chickens. We domesticated them all. It takes time and patience, but almost any animal can be domesticated if you're persistent enough. Though I admit, something this size and temperament would be challenging." "Challenging," Rodriguez added with a scientist's precision, "but not impossible. Selective breeding, controlled environments, proper training protocols. Give it a few generations, and you could have these things as livestock, though you'd need very large pens." The concept was so alien to the Velcrin way of thinking that many of them simply stood in silence, trying to process it. Their greatest nightmare reduced to the level of farm animals. The creature that had shaped their entire civilization, their cities, their military doctrine, their mythology, being casually discussed as a future food source. Night had fallen fully by the time Dubois announced that the primary cuts were ready for cooking. He had set up his field kitchen with military efficiency, a series of high-powered heating elements, cooking surfaces, and preparation areas that could have served a small army. And indeed, a crowd had gathered that seemed to include half the capital city's population. Word had spread that the humans were going to cook and eat razor-wing meat. "Tonight," Dubois declared, his voice carrying across the gathering, "we prepare this magnificent creature in multiple ways to show the range of possibilities. Some cuts will be grilled over high heat to create a seared crust while keeping the interior tender. Others will be slow-cooked in a stew with local vegetables that Dr. Rodriguez has confirmed are compatible. And some, the very best cuts, will be prepared as steaks, seasoned simply to let the natural flavor shine through." He moved around his kitchen with practiced grace, his hands moving in constant motion. Threx watched, mesmerized, as the chef worked. There was artistry here, he realized. This wasn't just about sustenance. For humans, food was something more, a form of expression, a way to connect, a transformation of the dangerous and deadly into something that brought people together. The first steaks came off the grill, and the smell that wafted through the air made every Velcrin in attendance stop and stare. It was rich, complex, savory in a way that their standard food sources never achieved. Dubois cut the steak into small pieces, plated them with some kind of sauce he had prepared, and offered them first to Ambassador Threx. "Ambassador," he said formally, "as the host of this gathering, you should have the first taste. I believe you will be pleasantly surprised." Threx looked at the plate in his hands. The meat was perfectly cooked, still pink in the center, the exterior beautifully caramelized. It smelled incredible. But this was Razorwing, the monster of his nightmares, the creature that had killed his grandfather, the species that had terrified his people since the dawn of their civilization. He looked up at the three humans, who were watching him with expressions of encouragement. Captain Chen nodded slightly. Dr. Rodriguez gave a thumbs up, a human gesture of approval. Chef Dubois simply smiled, confident in his work. Threx picked up a piece with his eating manipulator and brought it to his mouth. The entire crowd seemed to hold its breath. He chewed slowly, and his eyes widened. It was delicious, more than delicious. The meat was tender despite its density, with a flavor that was complex and deeply satisfying. The seasoning enhanced rather than overwhelmed. It was, without question, the best thing he had ever tasted. "By the ancestors," he whispered. Then louder, "By the ancestors! This is extraordinary!" A murmur ran through the crowd. Other Velcrins stepped forward, curiosity overcoming fear. Dubois and his human colleagues had prepared many portions, and soon dozens of Velcrin were tasting razorwing meat for the first time in their history. The reactions were universally positive, ranging from surprise to outright amazement. One elderly Velcrin, a veteran warrior with scars from a razorwing encounter decades ago, took a bite and began to laugh. It was a strange sound, mixing relief and disbelief in something like liberation. "We have feared this creature for thousands of years," she said, tears in her eyes, "and it tastes wonderful. How can something so terrifying be so delicious?" Captain Chen put a hand on the warrior's shoulder. A gesture that the Velcrin were learning indicated comfort and solidarity. "That's the human way. We've learned that the things that scare us don't have to control us. Sometimes the best way to overcome fear is to understand it. And sometimes understanding leads to appreciation. And appreciation, well, that sometimes leads to dinner." The feast continued long into the night. Dubois prepared dish after dish, each one showcasing different aspects of the razorwing's meat. Grilled steaks, slow-cooked stews, roasted cuts with local vegetables, even a soup made from the bones that was so rich and flavorful that Velcrin were requesting the recipe. The humans moved through the crowd, talking, laughing, sharing stories of their own world's dangerous creatures and how humanity had learned to coexist with, hunt, or domesticate them. Dr. Rodriguez found himself surrounded by Velcrin scientists, discussing the possibilities of razorwing ranching. The first generation would have to be wild-caught and bred in captivity, he explained, sketching diagrams on a datapad. You'd select for less aggressive traits, better feed conversion, maybe smaller size for easier handling. After 10 or 15 generations, you'd have something much more manageable. Earth did this with wolves, turning them into dogs, with auroch cattle, with wild boars. There's no reason it can't work here. But the danger, one scientist protested. The breeding program would be incredibly risky. Sure, Rodriguez agreed, but your people have been fighting razorwings for centuries anyway. At least this way, the risk leads to something productive. Besides, dangerous jobs are nothing new. Earth has plenty of them. Deep-sea fishing, high-rise construction, smoke jumping into forest fires. Humans are pretty good at doing dangerous things if the payoff is worth it. And trust me, meat this good? That's a payoff worth working for. Chef Dubois was teaching a group of Velcrin cooks his techniques, demonstrating how different cuts required different approaches. The tough cuts, they need time and moisture. Low heat, many hours. The tender cuts can be fast and hot, but always you must respect the ingredient. The creature gave its life. Your job is to honor that sacrifice by making it as delicious as possible. One young Velcrin cook, her eyes bright with excitement, asked, "Could we use our traditional spice blends with this meat?" "But absolutely," Dubois exclaimed. "I have only used simple earth seasonings tonight because I did not want to presume on your culinary traditions. But you must experiment. Find what works. Cooking is art and science together. Every culture must make the food their own. Perhaps you will discover combinations that are even better than what I have made." Captain Chen found herself in conversation with a group of Velcrin military commanders. They wanted to know everything about human hunting tactics, weapon systems, and combat philosophy. She answered their questions honestly, explaining the principles of asymmetric warfare, the use of intelligence and planning to overcome superior physical strength, the importance of adaptability and innovation. "Your species seems remarkably comfortable with danger," one commander observed. "We build walls, you attack." Chen shook her head. "We build walls too, but we also learn that walls can become prisons if that's all you rely on. Sometimes the best defense is understanding your enemy so well that they stop being an enemy and become a resource. That razorwing? It was trying to eat your farmers because that's what predators do. But if you could control their population, farm them, maybe even guide their behavior through selective management, they stop being a threat and become an asset." "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple," Chen admitted. "It takes generations. It takes failures and setbacks, and probably some tragedy along the way. But it's possible. Everything's possible if you're willing to work for it. That's maybe the most human trait there is. Stubborn refusal to accept that something can't be done." As the night grew later, the feast transformed into something more than just a meal. It became a celebration. Music started, a blending of Velcrin traditional instruments with human rhythms that Dr. Rodriguez provided through a portable speaker. Velcrin and humans danced together, their movements incompatible, but their enjoyment universal. Children who should have been asleep watched wide-eyed as humans told stories of Earth's monsters. Great white sharks that could bite a boat in half, saltwater crocodiles that lurked in rivers, grizzly bears that could run faster than the fastest human, and how humanity had learned to live alongside all of them, and yes, occasionally eat them. Ambassador Threx found himself sitting with Captain Chen, both of them watching the festivities with satisfaction. "You have done something remarkable tonight," Threx said quietly. "You have changed how my people see ourselves and our world. For thousands of years we have been defined by our fear of the razorwing. They were the ultimate predator, and we were merely survivors. But you have shown us that this is not a fixed truth, that with different thinking, different approaches, we could be more than survivors. Chen smiled, though there was something thoughtful in her expression. Ambassador, can I tell you a secret about humanity? Please. We're not actually that special. We're not stronger or faster or tougher than most species. We're not even particularly smart compared to some of the other species we've met in the galaxy. But we have one advantage that's served us well. We're too curious and too stubborn to accept limitations. Someone tells us something is impossible, and our first instinct is to prove them wrong. Something scares us, and we want to understand it. And once we understand it, well, we usually want to eat it. Threx laughed, a sound he hadn't made often in his long diplomatic career. I am beginning to understand why the Galactic Council was both excited and nervous about humanity joining. Oh? You are disruptive, not in a hostile way, but in a way that challenges assumptions. The galaxy has become comfortable in many ways, set in our patterns. Each species knows its role, its place, its limitations. And then humans arrive and ask, but why? And what if? It is unsettling. Is that a bad thing? Threx considered the question carefully. Around them, his people were celebrating, truly celebrating, in a way he had rarely seen. The fear that had shadowed every Velcrin for their entire lives had been, if not eliminated, at least challenged. They had eaten their nightmare and found it delicious. The psychological impact of that could not be overstated. No, he said finally, I do not think it is a bad thing at all. I think perhaps the galaxy needed disrupting. The feast continued until dawn broke over Velcros Prime. As the first light touched the purple sky, Chef Dubois was still cooking, having moved from razor wing to other local ingredients, experimenting with Velcrin vegetables and grains, creating fusion dishes that had never existed before. Dr. Rodriguez had retreated to document his findings, but kept being interrupted by Velcrin scientists with questions and ideas. Captain Chen coordinated the cleanup effort with Velcrin volunteers who insisted on helping. True to his word, Dubois had used every part of the razor wing. The bones were being boiled down for broth stock. The organs had been prepared various ways, finding enthusiastic audiences among Velcrin who appreciated the traditional nose-to-tail philosophy that Dubois explained. The hide was being processed for leather. The scales had been carefully collected and presented to Velcrin materials scientists, who were already theorizing about their applications. A delegation from the Velcrin Council arrived as the celebration was winding down. They looked exhausted, having clearly been in emergency session throughout the night. The lead counselor, an ancient Velcrin with chest plates that had gone gray with age, approached the humans with an expression that Threx had learned to read as profound respect. Captain Chen, the counselor said formally, the council has convened, and we wish to make several proposals regarding our diplomatic relationship. I'm listening, Chen replied, her professional demeanor returning instantly. First, we would like to formally request Earth's assistance in developing a razor wing management program. If what your Dr. Rodriguez suggests is possible, the transformation of our greatest threat into a valuable resource would be beneficial beyond measure. That can be arranged. We'll need to send specialists, but I'm sure Earth will be happy to help. Second, we wish to invite Chef Dubois to remain on Velcros Prime temporarily to train our culinary professionals in these new techniques. We will, of course, compensate him appropriately. Dubois, overhearing this, grinned widely. But I would be honored. There is so much potential here. Your vegetables, they are fascinating. And I have ideas for other local animals that might be delicious. The counselor's expression might have been a smile. Third, and most importantly, we wish to propose an acceleration of the trade agreements we have been negotiating. After tonight, the council has concluded that the Velcrin people have much to learn from humanity, and perhaps humanity has things to learn from us as well. Captain Chen's smile was genuine. I think that sounds like an excellent foundation for a strong partnership, counselor. As the official negotiations began in earnest, Threx found himself with a quiet moment to reflect. He walked to the edge of the platform where the celebration had been held, looking out over his city. The walls still stood, massive and imposing, the product of centuries of fear and defensive thinking. But somehow, they looked different now, less like protection and more like a limitation. His people had lived in fear for so long that they had forgotten how to imagine alternatives. It had taken 3 humans and 1 dead razorwing to show them that fear was not destiny, that the deadliest predator on their world was not an unconquerable force, but an animal that bled, that died, and yes, that could be eaten. He thought about the stories Captain Chen had shared of Earth's history: humans hunting mammoths with stone-tipped spears, humans diving into the ocean to catch fish that could swallow them whole, humans climbing mountains that killed regularly, exploring deserts that showed no mercy, sailing across vast oceans into the unknown, and always, everywhere, learning that the things that scared them most could be understood, managed, and often enough, consumed. It was a radically different worldview from what the Velcrin had developed, but perhaps that was exactly what they needed. A species that looked at danger and saw opportunity, that faced the impossible and asked, "How can we cook this?" The sun was fully up now, and in the distance, Threx could see the canyons where razorwings made their lairs. For the first time in his life, he looked at those dark spaces not with dread, but with a different kind of anticipation. There were more razorwings out there, many more, and now his people knew they could be caught, killed, and eaten. Perhaps in a few years, those same canyons would host the first razorwing ranches. The creatures that had terrorized the Velcrin for millennia would become livestock, their threat neutralized through domestication rather than force. The meat that had been so impressive tonight would become a staple of Velcrin cuisine, maybe even an export product to the wider galaxy. And all of it because 3 humans had looked at his people's nightmare and said, "I wonder how that tastes." Chef Dubois approached, carrying 2 plates of his morning creation: razorwing meat with scrambled eggs from a local bird analog, seasoned with native herbs. "Ambassador," he said warmly, "you must try this. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and this is a breakfast worthy of celebration." Threx accepted the plate and took a bite. It was, of course, delicious. Everything Dubois made seemed to be. "Chef," he said between bites, "I must ask, on Earth, when you first began eating your world's predators, was it out of necessity or curiosity?" Dubois considered the question thoughtfully. "Both, I think. In the beginning it was survival. Humans ate what they could catch. But over time, as we became better hunters, it became something more. We began to seek out the most dangerous prey, not because we had to, but because we could. Because conquering the unconquerable was how we proved ourselves. And along the way, we discovered that danger often comes with delicious meat. Nature seems to have a sense of humor that way." "A sense of humor," Threx repeated. "That is one way to look at it." "It is the only way to look at it," Dubois replied with a grin. "What else can you do but laugh when you realize that the scariest thing in your world makes the best steak?" Captain Chen joined them, accepting her own plate from Dubois with thanks. "Ambassador, I just got word from Earth. They're extremely interested in the Razorwing project. They're putting together a team of xenobiologists, animal behavior specialists, and agricultural experts. Should be here within a month." "So quickly?" "When humans hear about a dangerous alien predator that tastes good, word spreads fast. Half of them want to study it. The other half want to figure out how to open a restaurant chain." Dr. Rodriguez wandered over, looking disheveled but excited. "I just ran some genetic analysis on the razorwing samples. This is fascinating. Their DNA suggests they might actually be related to some of the herbivore species on your planet. Evolutionary divergence, maybe 20 million years ago. which means there might be genetic tools we can use to accelerate the domestication process. Instead of 15 generations, we might be able to do it in 5 or 6 with the right approach. 6 generations, Threx calculated quickly. If we can breed them in captivity, that would be perhaps 30 standard years. Give or take, Rodriguez agreed. Your grandchildren might see razor-wing ranches as common as cattle farms are on Earth. The concept still seemed fantastical, but after last night, Threx was learning not to dismiss human claims as impossible. They had a disturbing habit of making the impossible routine. The weeks that followed were transformative for Velcro's Prime. The human specialists arrived as promised, and with them came a wave of new thinking that rippled through Velcran society. The first razor-wing capture facility was established in the canyons, using techniques the humans had developed for dangerous animals on Earth. It was dangerous work. 2 Velcran handlers were injured in the first month, though both recovered. But slowly, carefully, they began capturing live razor wings, studying their behavior, and experimenting with breeding protocols. Chef Dubois became a celebrity on Velcro's Prime. His cooking classes were oversubscribed, and his fusion of human and Velcran cuisines created a culinary revolution. Razor wing meat became available in markets, expensive at first, but growing more common as the hunting programs became more efficient and systematic. Restaurants specializing in razor wing dishes opened throughout the capital. The creature that had been a source of terror became a source of pride, and ironically, economic prosperity. But the most significant change was psychological. The Velcran had lived for so long with the mentality of prey, of victims surviving against a hostile world. The humans had shown them an alternative, the mentality of hunters, of beings who refused to be limited by fear. It changed how the Velcrans saw themselves and their place in the galaxy. Ambassador Threx stood once again at the edge of the landing platform, watching another human ship arrive. This one carried diplomats and trade representatives, coming to finalize the agreements that would bind Earth and Velcro's Prime in a lasting alliance. But more than that, it carried the promise of continued exchange, continued learning, continued growth. Captain Chen had returned to Earth weeks ago, but she had sent a message that Threx read often. Ambassador, you asked me once if humanity was disruptive to the galactic order. I've been thinking about that. Maybe we are. But sometimes disruption is exactly what's needed. Your people had been living one way for thousands of years, and it wasn't working. You were surviving, but not thriving. Sometimes it takes an outsider to come in and ask the uncomfortable questions, like, why don't you eat that thing that's been eating you? The galaxy is full of species that have reached comfortable equilibriums. They've found their place and stopped pushing. Humanity hasn't stopped pushing. Maybe we never will. And if our refusal to accept limitations helps other species question their own, then I think that's a good thing. Keep pushing, Ambassador. Keep questioning, and keep enjoying those razor-wing steaks. Threx smiled at the memory. The human capacity for irreverence, even in profound moments, was something he had come to appreciate. They took nothing too seriously except their fundamental values: curiosity, cooperation, and the stubborn insistence that limitations were meant to be challenged. The new human ship touched down, and Threx moved forward to greet its passengers. He noticed he walked differently now, with less of the nervous caution that had characterized his movements before. He had eaten his fear, literally, and in doing so had learned that fear was just another challenge to be overcome. As the ship's doors opened and the new wave of humans emerged, Threx felt something he had rarely experienced in his long life: excitement for the future. Not anxiety about what threats tomorrow might bring, but genuine excitement about what possibilities awaited. The Velcran had spent millennia building walls to keep danger out. The humans had shown them that sometimes the better solution was to open the gates, walk out into the danger, and bring it back for dinner. It was a lesson that would reshape not just Velcro's Prime, but potentially the entire galaxy as other species watched and learned from the Velcrin transformation. Behind him, the city sprawled toward the horizon, its walls still standing but already being discussed as potential historical monuments rather than necessary defenses. Construction had begun on new settlements outside the walls, in territories that had been considered too dangerous for permanent habitation. Razorwing sightings were still regular, but now they were met not with panic, but with calls to the hunting teams, who had become skilled at non-lethal capture for the breeding program. The first human to exit the new ship was a woman carrying what appeared to be cooking equipment. Of course it was. Wherever humans went, apparently, so did their culinary ambitions. Threx found himself laughing, a sound that was becoming more common among his people. "Welcome to Velcros Prime," he called out in English, a language he had been practicing. "I hope you're hungry. We have so much to show you." The woman grinned, that peculiarly human expression of joy and mischief combined. "Ambassador Threx, we've been looking forward to this. I'm Chef Maria Santos, and I brought some earth ingredients I think will pair wonderfully with your local razorwing. Shall we begin?" And so it continued, this strange and wonderful partnership between a species that had lived in fear and a species that had learned to feast on it. The galaxy watched, fascinated and perhaps a little worried, as humans spread their particular brand of problem-solving, curiosity without fear, innovation without limits, and the unshakable belief that almost anything tasted better with the right seasoning. Years later, when other species asked the Velcrin what it was like to encounter humanity for the first time, they would tell the story of the night 3 humans came to their world, looked at their deadliest predator, and asked what it tasted like. It became a cautionary tale for some species, a warning about human recklessness and their disturbing habit of eating things that should not be eaten. But for the Velcrin, it was something different. It was their liberation story. The night they learned that nightmares could become dinner. The night they discovered that fear was not permanent, but could be transformed, overcome, and yes, consumed. And every year, on the anniversary of that first feast, the Velcrins celebrated what they called Human Day, with a massive festival featuring razorwing meat prepared in countless ways, honoring the 3 humans who had taught them that the greatest predator on their world was not an unstoppable force of nature, but an animal that could bleed, could fall, and could fill a plate with the most delicious meat in the sector. Ambassador Threx, in his retirement, would often attend these festivals. He would tell the story to young Velcrin, watching their eyes widen as he described that first night. And he would always end with the same words: "Remember, younglings, that fear is only as powerful as we allow it to be." The humans taught us that. They looked at our nightmare and saw dinner. And in doing so, they showed us that we were capable of so much more than we believed. Never let fear tell you what is impossible. Because if humans have taught us anything, it is that impossible is just another word for we haven't tried hard enough yet. And then he would raise his glass, filled with a fine razor-wing bone broth that had become his favorite drink, and toast to humanity, the species that had come to Velcros Prime and asked the question that changed everything. How does it taste?